Hello dear students, my name is Zhussubalina Zh.М, and I'm a teacher at the Department of Modern Languages and Translation Studies. Today I'm going to present you a lecture on the discipline Key Concepts in Translation Studies. The lecture theme is word-for-word and sense-for-sense translation. So the plan for the lecture is what is word-for-word translation and what is sense-for-sense translation. So translation is a crucial process that allows communication between people who speak different languages. When we translate we transform the content of one language, so let it call the source language, into another language, so it is called the target language. So one of the simplest and most basic approaches to translation is called word-for-word translation, which involves directly transferring each word from the source language to the target language. So this method of translation can be helpful in some cases, especially for beginners or when dealing with simple text. So, however, it also have many limitations because languages often have different grammatical structures, idioms, and cultural nuances. So what is word-for-word translation? Word-for-word translation is a type of literal translation where each word in the source language is directly replaced with its equivalent in the target language. So the word order and structure of the original sentence are preserved as much as possible without adjusting to the syntax and idiomatic expressions of the target language. So let's take an easy example. I like to eat apples. So the Russian word-for-word translation «Я нравится есть яблоки». And in Kazakh, «Мен natу alma жеу». So while each word has a direct translation, the sentence does not follow the correct grammar in Russian and Kazakh language. So the verb like, which is нравится in Russian and natу in Kazakh, so requires a different sentence structure. So the correct Russian translation will be «Мне нравится есть яблоки», and in Kazakh it will be «Маған алма жеген ұнайды». So let's take another example. So she is a teacher. So the sentence consists of the verb to be. So and word-for-word translation, она есть учитель. So the verb to be is translated as быть, являться. So and in Kazakh it's translated as болу. So but it is incorrect translation. So the correct equivalent of this sentence is она учитель, and in Kazakh ол оқытушы. So the verb to be is omitted in the present tense. So what kind of challenges of word-for-word translation we may face during translation? So while word-for-word translation can work for simple sentences, so when the two languages have similar structures, it often leads to awkward and incorrect translations when, first, the sentence structures are different. Languages like Russian and English have different rules for word order, especially in more complex sentences. Idiomatic expressions, phrases that are common in one language, may not make sense when translated directly into another language. So cultural differences is another point. Some concepts or words might not exist in the target language, so or they have very different meanings. So another example of idiomatic expression it's raining cats and dogs. So in Kazakh and in Russian it will sound like дождит кошками и собаками, and in Kazakh it will sound like мысық ит болып жауын жауып жатыр. But it's incorrect translation because it is idiomatic expression and this makes no sense in Russian and in Kazakh. So the correct translation that conveys the meaning is идет сильный дождь, льет как из ведра. And in Kazakh, жауын, қатты жауын болып тұр. Okay. So when is word-for-word translation is useful. So despite its limitations, word-for-word translation can be useful in certain situations. The first is when language learners, they start learning the language. So beginners who are learning new language can benefit from word-for-word translation because it helps them understand vocabulary and sentence structure of the new language. So second thing is simple text. So for short, straightforward sentences with similar grammatical structures, word-for-word translation can work without significant issues. So let's take another example. For example, I have a book. Here we have the verb have, which is translated as иметь, and in Kazakh, болу. So the Russian translation is у меня есть книга, and in Kazakh it will be менің кітабым бар. So the structure of the sentence in both languages is simple, and the direct translation works. Word-for-word translation is a basic and straightforward method of translating text. So, however, it's not always accurate or appropriate for more complex sentences, idiomatic expressions, and culturally specific phrases. So, in professional creative translation, these methods should be used with caution. So, more advanced techniques are often necessary to capture the true meaning and spirit of the original text. Okay, let's go to the second question of the lecture. In translation, it is essential to focus not just on the words, but on the meaning of the original text. So this type of translation is called sense-for-sense translation or semantic translation. So the goal here is to make sure that the message of the original is conveyed accurately in the target language. So even if the words or sentence structure have to change. Languages are not just collection of words, they reflect different cultures, ways of thinking, and ways of expressing ideas. In many cases, direct translation of words does not capture the full meaning of a sentence, so a translator must consider context, culture, and intention when translating. So, sense-for-sense translation, it focuses on conveying the meaning rather than individual words. So, this type of translation adapts the text to fit the grammatical and cultural norms of the target language while preserving the original meaning. For example, I'm feeling blue. So in Russian it will sound like я чувствую себя синим, and in Kazakh өзімді көк сезініп тұрмын. So, but this will be incorrect translation. The literal translation makes no sense in Russian because blue as an emotion does not exist in Russian. So the correct translation should convey the meaning that the person is feeling sad. So it will sound like мне грустно, and in Kazakh көңілім болмай тұр. Okay, and another example, I'm on cloud 9. So this idiom is expressing another emotion. So if to translate it word for word, it will sound я на 9-м облаке, мен 9-шы бұлттам. So this is also incorrect. So the correct equivalent for this will be мен қуанып тұрмын, я на 7-м небе от счастья. So in this case the phrase cloud 9 means extreme happiness. So and in Russian common phrase for the feeling is на 7-м небе. So you may notice that the number is different. So we cannot translate на 7-м небе from Russian into English as on the 7th heaven because we have the equivalent as I mentioned before. So importance of context. Context plays a crucial role in sense-for-sense translation. So words can have different meanings depending on how they are used in a sentence, and translator must consider the broader context to make the correct translation. Let's take another example. He dropped the ball. So the literal translation will be он уронил мяч, or удобно түсіріп. So the correct sense-for-sense translation will be he missed the chance. Он упустил шанс, он мүмкіндігін жоғалтып алды. So drop the ball in English as an idiom that means to make mistake or miss an opportunity. Cultural differences in meaning. In some cases, words or phrases carry cultural significance that is hard to translate directly. The translator must find equivalent expressions in the target language that convey the same cultural meaning. Another example is let's grab a coffee. The verb grab, it has the meaning in Russian хватать, схватить, and in Kazakh стол. So if to translate it word for word translation, it will be translated as давай схватим кофе, кофе на стопалаях. But it is also incorrect. So as in English, grab a coffee is a casual way to suggest going out for coffee. But in Russian, the word возьмем, which is take, sounds unnatural. So the more idiomatic expression in Russian would be попьем кофе, which translates to let's go to drink coffee. Translating emotions and tone. Sense for sense translation is especially important when translating emotional content, where the tone and feeling of the message must be preserved. I was over the moon. So this is an idiom also expressing the emotion. So we cannot translate it literally as я был над луной, айднустунде болдым. So because the correct Russian translation, я был в восторге. So here the over the moon is an idiom that means extreme happiness and excitement. So the literal translation does not make sense in Russian. So the phrase я был в восторге, so in other words, I was thrilled, is used instead of convey the meaning. Sense for sense translation is essential for conveying the true meaning of the original text. It takes into account context, culture, and emotions, making the translation more accurate and natural in the target language. So this method allows the translator to capture not only the words, but the intent and spirit of the original. So I hope my lecture was informative and useful for you. Thank you for your attention.